Chapter 135 Shizun studies on the sly. Yuliang village was tiny. Many of its villagers were getting on in years, and there were very few young people, so during harvest time, they would commonly ask the cultivators from Xisheng Peak for help. Any other sect would have completely ignored requests like these that had nothing to do with cultivation. But Chu Chengyong and his older brother had started Xisheng Peak from scratch and had endured their share of hardships in their youth. Rumor had it that growing up, most of their meals had been taken at the tables of generous neighbors. Thus, Chu Chengyong didn't have it in him to refuse such humble requests from the old tenant farmers and diligently attended to them, sending disciples to help every time. The village was far enough from Xisheng Peak that walking was inconvenient, but close enough that taking a carriage would be unnecessarily ostentatious. Thus, Chu Chengyong had 2 fine horses prepared for Ran and Chu Wanning. It was late autumn, and the foliage had revealed its fall colors. When Chu Wanning came down the stairs to the main gate, he was greeted by the sight of Moran standing beneath a tall maple tree, its scarlet frost-adorned leaves rustling in the wind, like the sheen on fine brocade or the splashing of red carp. Moran held the reins of a black horse, while a white horse nuzzled his cheek. He was in the middle of teasing them with a tuft of alfalfa flowers when he heard the sound of footsteps approaching. Fragments of red fluttered down as he turned to look over his shoulder, brightly beaming between the dancing leaves. "Shizun!" Chu Wanning's footsteps slowed, then came to a stop on the last few steps. Sunlight filtered through the luxuriant canopy to fall on the moss-covered stone. He stared at the man standing there, not so far away. Perhaps it was because they were setting off to do farm work, but Moran wasn't wearing Xisheng Peak's disciple uniform today, nor was he wearing those white robes from when he'd first returned. Instead, he had on black raiment with wrapped wrist guards, simple attire that accentuated his slim waist, long legs, and broad shoulders. He had a good figure, especially in the upper torso, where his open collar revealed a firm, toned chest, the gold of honey, rising and falling with each breath. If the showiness of Sure Monk's customary get-up with its sparkling silver armor was like a peacock fanning its tail, then this look of Moran's had a quiet allure, an innocent kind of allure, an uncomplicated kind of allure. In other words, the air it gave off said, "I'm a decent, upright person. I've never teased or provoked anyone in my life, and the only thing I know is honest work." Chu Wanning looked him up and down several times before opening his mouth to say, "Moran." The strapping young man replied with a smile. What is it, Shizun?" Chu Wanning's face was deadpan. "Aren't you cold with your lapels open that wide?" After a moment of surprise, Moran came to the conclusion that his Shizun was expressing concern for him and suddenly felt giddy. He tossed the alfalfa back into the hay basket for the horses, dusted off his hands, and bounded up the bluestone steps to stand charmingly in front of Chu Wanning, grabbing him by the wrist before he could react. "Not cold at all. Actually, I'm kinda warm from rushing around all morning." He grinned gillously as he pressed Chu Wanning's hand to his own chest. "See, Shizun?" It felt scalding. The young man's chest was hot to the touch. Combined with that strong heartbeat and those star-bright eyes, Chu Wanning could feel his entire back going numb. He ripped his hand away as his expression grew stormy. "Indecent." Moran misunderstood. Is it sweaty?" He thought that Chu Wanning wasn't into men. After all, their entanglement in his past life had been brought about by coercion on his part, so he didn't think Chu Wanning had any interest in him, and remembering Chu Wanning's love of cleanliness and dislike of touching people, chalked his Shizun's annoyance up to his sweatiness. Moran felt embarrassed and scratched his head as he said, "That was thoughtless of me." Had he looked closely, he would have seen the blush at the base of Chu Wanning's elegant neck, and the glimmer of affection beneath those coolly downcast lashes. But he had missed that narrow window of opportunity, and Chu Wanning wasn't about to give him another. Chu Wanning descended the slippery bluestone steps in his snow-white shoes, headed directly for the black horse, and mounted it in a single graceful motion, smooth as flowing water. With the sunlight gilding the land and red autumn leaves as far as the eyes could see, the white-robed man sitting atop the tall black horse glanced over his shoulder at his disciple still on the ground. His face was like cool jade, exuding an air of loftiness, ever the sharp and handsome Yuheng elder. "I'm off. Keep up." With that, those long legs tightened around the horse, spurring it into a gallop. Moran stood rooted in place for several moments. He picked up the bamboo basket, still half filled with the alfalfa flowers he'd been feeding the horses, and tied it to the white horse's saddle before leaping up himself, caught between laughter and tears. "But Shizun, the black horse is mine. Don't just... Shizun, wait for me!" On the backs of their swift horses, they arrived at Yuliang village within the hour. A few acres of rice paddies stretched along the border of the village, and the breeze rolled in waves through the fields of golden grain. Some 30-odd farmers toiled away in the paddies. Due to the shortage of helping hands, young and old alike were working in the fields, backs bent low, and trouser legs rolled up as they swung their sickles, beads of sweat dripping from their faces with the exertion. Without any delay, Moran found the village chief, handed him the letter of commission from Chu Chengyong, then stepped into a pair of hemp shoes and made for the fields. Moran had both strength and stamina aplenty, and was a cultivator to boot. Harvesting crops was no trouble for him. In less than half a day, he'd harvested 2 whole rows of rice. As the golden ears piled up next to the paddy field, soaking up the sunlight, the sweet scent of grain wafted through the air. The sound of the farmer's sickles rustled across the plateaus, and a maiden sat on the ridge between the paddy fields, singing a leisurely farming song as she gathered the grains. "The sun setting behind a mountain shines like a red flower, painting all for mountains red, oh red like peonies. A red fan to sing my love song, a hydrangea to ask my lover boy, tugging at his belt, when are you coming? Today I have no time, tomorrow I must chop firewood, the day after I can come calling." The farmer girl blithely sang these coy lyrics in that soft little tune, and the words drifted through the air and slipped into the hearts of the listeners. "Today I have no time, tomorrow I must chop firewood, the day after I can come calling." Chu Wanning did not go to work in the fields. Instead, he sat under a tree, drinking a jar of hot water. His eyes followed that black-clad, hard-working silhouette in the distance as he listened. His thoughts were all over the place, and the water he swallowed seemed to flow into his chest rather than his stomach, soaking it with heat. "What an obscene song," he said coldly when he'd finished the water. He rose to return the ceramic jar to the village chief, who stared hesitantly at him. Chu Wanning asked irritably, "What is it?" "Is Jojo not going to work the fields?" The wizened village chief was a straightforward man. He directly answered the question in his shaky voice, white beard trembling and white brows creased. "Is Jianjun just here to oversee things?" Chu Wanning didn't know how to reply. Never before had he been put on the spot like this. Work the fields? Hadn't Chu Chengyong said he could just sit on the side and watch Moran? Did he actually have to work too? He didn't know how. But the old village chief was staring at him like he still had more to say, and a couple of kids and old women nearby, having heard the exchange, turned to stare at this immaculately dressed man. Children held nothing back. A little kid with his hair in buns asked brightly,
Granny, the Star Jungle is all dressed in white. How is he going to do any work in the fields? His sleeves are so wide,
another kid murmured.
And his shoes are so clean.
Chu Wanning prickled all over with awkwardness. He stood there for a moment, but he was really too thin-skinned to remain idle after what he'd heard. He grabbed a sickle and waded into the paddy field without even removing his shoes. The slippery mud immediately clung to his feet, and the standing water rose past his ankles. Chu Wanning took 2 ginger steps, frowning at how slick everything felt, then tried swinging the sickle a couple of times. It was a fumbling attempt, as he knew nothing of the technique.
The Star Jungle is such a dum-dum.
A pair of little kids, watching from the mulberry tree, laughed with their cheeks propped in their hands. Chu Wanning fumed silently, his face darkening. He couldn't stand to be near these people a moment longer. He summoned all the poise he possessed to keep his handsome face straight and his pace steady as he waded through the mud in great strides toward the figure busily cutting rice in the distance. The saying went that one could always learn from others. Well, he was going to learn it on the sly. He stealthily observed Moran at work. When it came to farm work, Moran was clearly more skilled than Chu Wanning. He was bent over under the blazing sun, each swing of his sickle reaping sheaves of golden rice that fell softly and obediently into his waiting embrace. He gathered large armfuls before tossing them into the bamboo basket behind him. So absorbed was he in the task that he didn't even notice Chu Wanning's approach. His gaze was focused downward as he worked diligently, his straight nose casting a shadow across his cheek as a bead of sweat trickled down. A feral scent emanated from his body, scorching and wild, muted yet fervent. Under the sunlight, his skin was like red-hot steel that had just come out of the crucible, still crackling with sparks and hissing with steam, blindingly bright and beautifully brilliant. Standing a short distance away, Chu Wanning enjoyed the view for a while before abruptly realizing what he was doing. He frowned, shook his head, and muttered something under his breath, then continued wading forward with a straight face. He was going to learn, sneakily. He was just going to observe how Moran held the sickle and what angle he swung it at. He would find out why the rice that was stiff as iron wires in his own hands became pliant as boneless maidens in Moran's, falling so willingly and eagerly into his arms. Chu Wanning was so absorbed in watching that he didn't notice the frog by his foot until it leapt up with a loud "rabbit" and hopped off toward the ridge. Caught by surprise, he jerked his leg back. But the paddy field was too slippery and he was too unprepared. So it was that the great Yuhang elder tipped forward, on track for a direct faceplant into the mud, all because of a single brazen frog. With his face about to meet the mire, Chu Wanning had no time to cast anything. On reflex, he reached out to grab at the hard-working person before him. The village maiden's singing sounded even more coquettish. "Tugging at the skirt, when are you coming?" As luck would have it, Chu Wanning latched onto Moran's belt and stumbled forward a few steps to fall against a broad chest that was hot to the touch and musky with masculine scent, finding himself wrapped in a pair of strong, solid arms.